My name is Billie Zangewa, and I am a visual artist based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I call them silk collages. I don't call them tapestries because the technique that I use is kind of a bit like collaging. In fact, it's exactly the same. So I was born in Blantyre, Malawi, to a Malawian father and a South African mother. Then my family moved to Botswana, where I was raised, and I spent a lot of years living there. So Billie was an endearment that my friends in primary school gave me, and it followed me everywhere I went. My interest in art started in primary school. My best friend at the time came to me in the morning when we arrived at school, and she was like, Billie, I've got to show you something. I've got something amazing to show you. So then out of her bag, she pulled out this portrait drawing of Princess Diana that she had done at home the night before. And it was just so beautiful that I was touched. It was like I was punched in the stomach, and the emotion was so profound that I just knew in that moment that I wanted to give people that feeling. I went to university at Rhodes University, which is a university that does diverse things, but they have a fine art department. After graduating, I moved back home to Botswana, which is really where my career as an artist began. When I started working with my textiles, it was not accepted as art. I was called a craftswoman and I was dismissed. And it was a little infuriating because when I started doing my textiles, William Kentridge was experimenting with a woman's group, and they were doing some embroidered works, but they accepted him because he was William Kentridge. And the frustrating thing was he wasn't even picking up a needle. So I just, then you see the kind of duality in the art world of where women artists are placed and where male artists are placed. But I wasn't put off because I was I'm going to keep working at this until it's accepted. My current show that's touring the UK now is called A Quiet Fire, and it was curated by the director of CCA Brighton. For him, it was really about how I use the stitching to create something powerful, and that it's a gentle power. So the works in that show are loans from collectors, except for one piece that I made for the show called Paradise Revisited, which shows my son and I in the south of France having our first post-COVID holiday, enjoying ourselves. And then there's also another work called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which really speaks to the whole kind of black person going to visit the white family and how awkward it is. And of course, I really wanted to just get to the point because when people see the title, they know, it's based on the Sidney Poitier movie of the same name. And then there's also another work called Sweet Dreams, where I'm basically lounging in a tree like a leopard. And that work is really about my yearning for days gone by when my ancestors lived a much more simple life in Africa and were more connected to nature. Back to Black. It was the first time that I was going out in the evening after the birth of my son. And it was really the first time that I was putting on a nice dress. It was just me kind of coming to terms with this new stage where I would go out in the evening without my son after having been housebound for so long and identifying as mother and not as Billie, the individual. Another work in the show is called The Dior Effect, and it is actually a portrait of Christian Dior in his studio working with his seamstresses to create a new design. And that work was actually commissioned by Dior for their exhibition Designer of Dreams that was shown at the Brooklyn Museum. So my home is basically the center of my universe. I think it was only natural that I would then work from home because I feel safe enough to be vulnerable and open myself up and discover who I am creatively and then engage in the creative process. Also up until this point, I haven't had a studio. So I've been working at my kitchen table, which is very difficult because we can't cook when I'm making our work. But limitations are what, that's what oils, creativity. So it's all part of the process. And I think in a way, the fact that I do make works about my home and personal life, it only makes sense that I'm making them in that space. I started out using the free fabrics that I got because I had no money. But as I started selling my work, I was like, wow, now I can make bigger work. So I can go to the fabric store and I can buy bits of fabric. But I also still really enjoy being gifted a little scrap of something by a friend or a designer friend, or if I go thrift shopping and I see something in silk, then I'll go and repurpose it. So I still do that, but having resources was great because now it's like I can actually buy materials. I learned how to sew really, really young. So when I was in primary school, they were offering arts and crafts, as it was called at the time. I actually can't sew with a machine because I feel that I don't have control. I love the hand stitching, it's just so wonderful. I don't specifically choose the shapes as cutouts. They happen kind of organically. So if I buy a yard of fabric and then let's say I need that color in a piece, then I'll pin the paper for that piece onto the fabric, and then I'll cut out what I need. So it's really organic and spontaneous. I definitely do embrace the limitations. The kind of surrendering, I suppose, to the process is really what I do. And I honestly do believe that limitation is the mother of invention. I really do. So the role of art in society, I believe, is multifaceted. It has different roles. So the first role is really just for pleasure, to enjoy looking at something beautiful. But also the other role that art plays, which is something that I kind of play with, is to address sociopolitics in a way, for me, in a way that's quite gentle and palatable so that it makes the conversation a lot easier. I think that's also why my work looks so pretty on the surface, but then when you get a little bit closer, you start to realize that there's an underlying message that's a little bit more serious than what, first impressions. This work is called Field of Dreams, and it is the title piece of the show. I had this wish. I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if people of different cultures and skin tones could just come together and find commonality and just be one big happy family and see the things in common as opposed to the differences. So I called it Field of Dreams because I guess really it is my dream for the world. And really this is a family portrait of my extended family. And it could really be anyone, and it's really encouraging us to see each other as family. So this work is called In My Element. This is just really speaking to my obsession with water. And because this show is dealing with different elements, I wanted to introduce my element. So this is called In My Element. But it's also called In My Element because this is when I become my whole self, my happy, energized, amazing self comes to light when I'm interacting with water. My creative process is either I'll have an emotion, or I will have an actual experience, or I will observe something that will elicit an emotion. So for instance, in the show, there is a work of my son called Earthchild. Because he has a really good eye, especially for spatial things, we worked together to reconfigure all the things on the patio. So then he was holding plants to go and put them somewhere else. And it was so touching. It just moved me. I just knew there was something really special about that moment. So I said to him, hold on, don't move. I'm gonna get the camera. So then he's used to it by now. So he just like waited for me to come back, and I went and got the camera. And it turns out I was right. There was something magical in that moment. I tried to be as spontaneous as possible in like from having the idea to pulling out the tripod and the camera and actually capturing it. Because if I don't, it's like I miss the moment, and then I can't stage it later because it's just not as authentic if I have to do that. So I do have to seize the day. I feel that birthing my son has really transformed my creative process for the better. And instead of putting myself on the work and being a little bit narcissistic, I thought it was a great opportunity to pay tribute to my son for having been so instrumental in my creative process. This work is called Sea of Love, and it's basically my son sleeping under the covers. And I'm a bit obsessed with watching my son sleep. But when I looked at him sleeping under these covers, I looked at the covers and I looked at the creases and the patterns they formed, and it just made me think about the sea. But also, the other reason that I wanted to make it quite ambiguous, so it's like, is it bed covers, is it the sea, is also because I wanted to pay tribute to Georgia O'Keeffe, who was working here in Santa Fe, and I made this work specifically for Site Santa Fe. It also makes me think about the mystery of dreams and sleep, and how actually our feelings about things in our waking life come to us in our dreams as well. One of the reasons I started making art was that I would have a certain emotion that I found difficult to resolve, and then when I dealt with it in a work, and it would kind of be like the emotion is going in the work, so then I'm being released and the burden is being carried by my work. So yes, in a way it is an empowering form of therapy. That I get to share, joys and also shame, like, shameful things that I could potentially keep secret, but prefer to kind of break taboos, because shame is a very toxic emotion that is really keeping the parts of yourself that you believe that other people will not appreciate. So I think that in my work, when I have a particular subject addressing a certain thing, I'm encouraging conversation so that we don't feel alone and we feel a connection. And then suddenly those feelings that we've been keeping to ourselves are not so big as we thought they were, because we get to verbalize them and to share them and to find out that the other person has the same feelings. This work is called Source Energy, and it's really about how when I feel depleted, all I want to do is just go to the seaside. I just want to be by the sea, because there's just something about land and air and water coming together that I feel is just so powerful and has like these powers of transformation. The goal is just to keep experimenting, because I really, really enjoyed working with the mirrors, and I feel like, it started something, it's put something into motion, and I have this opportunity at Site to thank for that, because I felt like they made me want to experiment a little bit and not just stay in my comfort zone. Well, the only thing that actually always challenges me is my art. So then I knew that either I would just keep getting fired from jobs because I wasn't meant to be there, or I had to take the risk and just become, just realized my dream of being an artist. So I guess sometimes my agenda is to just highlight inequality in a way, to say I'm a woman and so far I have been dismissed and I have been invisible, but I am using this platform to make myself visible so that you can no longer ignore me, you can no longer deny me. I am a Black African woman and I have a place in this society and I have an inner strength that I will use to mark my place.